Thanks, Eric. I do remember Eric, and I can remember him when he was a DJ that had come in from somewhere else, and he had very fancy leather lapels on his jacket. Very cool, very, very cool. But my job here tonight is to bring you some memories of the days of the old CFCY radio station, back when it was on 6:30 on the AM dial. And you know, if you're like me, Christmas time does send you back to wonderful memories of a time when things in the world were a lot simpler. I was thinking about coming here, and you know, perhaps we could imagine more back then because we didn't know quite as much as we do now. I want you to join me in thinking back to a time when I was a little girl. Yeah, that's like 60 years ago. And my mother was on the radio as her alter ego, the storyteller. She hosted a program on CFCY called the Charlottetown Express. 3 times a week, and more often when it came closer to Christmas, you could hear the chug, 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 chug of a little train pulling into the station, and her lovely warm voice inviting all the children listening to put on their pretenders. Does anybody remember that? Put on your pretenders. And she wanted them to come along with her to a world on the radio that included friends that seemed so real at the time. Little Nose the elf. He was the one that had this sort of jumbly, speeded up voice that really only the storyteller could understand. And then there was Jennifer Duck, who we sometimes followed, sounded sort of like Daffy Duck sometimes. There was the beautiful Snow Queen and the Bubble Fairy. And, you know, I would sit on a little stool in our back living room by the big German radio set with my sister Daphne, who's here tonight. And we would listen to my mother become the storyteller. A couple of friends of mine are also here tonight, Aileen and Becky. They actually threatened to come in their jammies like they used to when they listened to the Charlottetown Express, but I see they chickened out, just in their regular clothes tonight. But lots of people do have that memory when they think back to the program. They'd be in their pajamas and it'd be just before bedtime. And she had a great time on the radio because she could suspend our disbelief. And she had a magic machine that allowed her to whisk through time and space. And she took her to all kinds of wonderful places all over the world where her stories took place. The Swiss Alps, the Arabian Nights, the North Pole. Because best of all, she actually got to talk to Santa Claus. I mean, he was a jolly old man who arrived during the middle of the show, just like the kind of person that we knew was going to visit our homes on Christmas Eve and bring us toys. The Santa on the radio loved to speak directly to the boys and girls who wrote into him with their Christmas requests. I had a chance to look back at some of those letters because my mom saved many of them. I went to the archives and opened up the files that she had saved, especially when she was preparing the book about CFCY. And I found this one, for example, Brian McWilliams from Coleman, PEI, wrote on December the 1st, 1964, "Dear Santa, please bring me a typewriter and Heather a projector with lots of slides. Wishing you a very Merry Christmas, Brian and Heather McWilliams, aged 11. There were also telegrams, like this one from Pictou. It was addressed to Santa at CFCY, and it said, "Dear Santa, I am just a little fellow and I haven't much to say. Stop." Remember telegrams, you had to stop. "But I hope that you will bring me lots of things on Christmas Day. Stop. I hope you will read my name tonight on the radio. Stop. I will be listening. Stop. Signed, Walton Bosch." Santa was also a talented singer, and he relied on a famous local character actor by the name of J. Austin Traynor, who had toured on the vaudeville circuit before settling home on the island with his family. My mother described him as a short, bouncy man with sparkling blue eyes. Mr. Traynor wrote wonderful parodies of well-loved Christmas poems and songs that Santa performed on the show. So my mother later told me that Santa always arrived at the studio in his bright red suit and that he always wore newly washed white gloves, no doubt prepared each week by Austin Trainer's wife, Patricia. There were many stories about the Sleepytown Express and all the fun that the CFCY staff had producing it. I think everybody at the station was recruited to play a part at some point or other. And you know, the well-known host and producer, Lon Macaulay, he was actually responsible for creating many of the sound effects, and he picked all the music for the show. But it is time now to turn to our special guest reader, so that you can enjoy a taste of the fun material that radio listeners heard in those days. We're going to welcome the Honorable Wade MacLauchlan, who's agreed to read Santa's Prince Edward Island parody of 'Twas a Night Before Christmas. So just as a few notes, Wade MacLauchlan is a historian, author, and our leader. He was professor of law at Dalhousie University, dean of law at UNB, and the president of UPI. And of course, earlier this year, he became the 32nd premier of our wonderful province. Premier MacLauchlan has deep roots in Prince Edward Island. He was born in Stanhope, and today resides just a few miles away in West Cove Head. We're so very pleased that he's agreed to be a guest reader with the festival tonight. And I promise, Wade, I won't tell the opposition that you're playing Santa Claus, because who knows what they could do with that the next time you get back to the legislature. Please join me in welcoming Premier Wade MacLauchlan.
Thank you, Kathy, for that introduction, and thanks to the organizers for the invitation to join you this evening in this beautiful season and in one of my favorite rooms in all of our beautiful province. And you could hear earlier that this room has some of the best musical acoustics to be found in our province. And when Kelly Mooney sang "Oh Holy Night" and the Teachers in Harmony and Friends sang earlier, we could certainly appreciate that. When Kelly sang A Little Country Church at Christmas time, it took me back to my own youth and one of my favorite memories of Christmas. In the country in those days, there would always be a Christmas concert organized for the Sunday school kids, and it would happen almost exactly on this date or 3 or 4 days from now. And by some quirk, I was always charged with memorizing a piece of 5 or 6 verses even when I was young. But before I go into that part of the story, I want to tell you that this really means as much as it does to me, because it reminds me of my grandmother. She had 11 children and 57 grandchildren. Her husband predeceased her by more than 40 years, so we all grew up around my grandmother. So she was both a matriarch and a medicine woman. So she'd give us poultices or steam baths, or if we had a cold like I do tonight, she'd say, well, that will just build up your immunity for the next one. But she always had ways of kind of making things real. So I'm back to this Sunday school concert. When I was about, I'll say 8, I had a 5 or 6 verse thing to memorize and stand up with my little bow tie and recite. And it was about a shepherd and a flock, and I hunted for it on the internet different times to see if I could actually find the piece. In any event, we spent most of our time laughing in those days, and it didn't take much to get us started. So I was about on the second line of the second verse, and someone in this little country church at Christmas time, like one of my cousins, caught my eye, and I started to laugh. And I did my best to suppress it and move on to another line or two, and then the laughing came back. And as you can likely imagine, by this time, the interaction between this 8-year-old and the bow tie, trying not to laugh, and the people in the church had us all pretty much in gales of laughter, except my mother. But I didn't get through the 3rd verse, and I finally decided I might as well just go and sit down and try another time. So at the end of the evening, I beat it home and got to bed before anyone else got home. And this brings me back to my grandmother. My birthday is next week, so it was sort of coming up in a few days. And by the time things got started at home in the morning, my grandmother had managed to have a birthday card delivered. She didn't drive or anything. And the birthday card said, "Happy birthday, Wade, and remember, a good laugh never hurt anyone." So that was some health advice as well as an amnesty, which I still appreciate. So the piece that Kathy spoke about was one of the pieces that would have been read on CFCY in the day, and I've made a few changes along the way. One change, I have to confess I wasn't able to make, but I want to say this since, in particular, since we're here with the Sisters of St. Martha, and I'm going to the Paris Conference on Climate Change tomorrow. The sisters have been a long time environmentalists, long before we invented climate change. And in any event, this includes Santa Claus flying around in an airplane. So if I had a chance to make some amendments, I likely would. But even reindeer, by the way, are ruminants, and that's another problem. In any event, 'twas the night before Christmas, and all through O'Leary, the Christmas tree shone in a manner quite cheery, and stockings were hung by the chimney with care, all the way from Elmara to the Cape of Kildare. The children were sleeping all snug in Tignish, in Surrey and Stratford and Cavendish. As high overhead in my big aeroplane, I dropped down to housetops again and again. A large bag of toys on my back has to last for the kiddies of Borden, Tryon and Belfast. My eyes how they twinkle, my dimples how merry, as I cross o'er the straits above the car ferry. And the beard on my chin is as white as the snow when I throttle my motor above New Glasgow. Tomorrow there'll be such a grand lot of fun for the kiddies, thinks I, when I'm o'er Kensington. There'll be toys for the lads and a doll for each lass, in Bonshaw, Miss Bush, Kelly's Cross and Dundas. An airplane for Johnny, a paint book for Sally, in Scotchford, Milton, Mount Stewart and Tyne Valley. There are many such places, I can't name them all, but all may be sure that old Santa will call. Now's the time for happy hearts and happy voices too, the thrill that comes with giving, a sign of friendships true. Santa and his helpers all have done their bit, and now there's nothing left to say except that this is it. All of our troubles can go fly a kite, for a Merry, Merry Christmas rules all our hearts tonight. Merry Christmas, everyone.